The navigation in SwiftUI consists of two different styles, and previously for until iOS 15 we only had navigation view, and in order to switch between them we had the navigation view style stack. So this is on the iPhone when you just move more views on top of the stack. With iOS 16 and macOS 13 we did get two different views, which is navigation stack and navigation split view. I already made a tutorial about navigation stack, and I'm going to link that here if you're interested. In this tutorial I want to talk about navigation split view. It's especially interesting if you want to if you develop an app for the iPad and the Mac. So I will show you two different examples, one with a 2-column navigation and one with a 3-column navigation. And I'm going to basically reuse a lot of the things I did with the navigation stack app. In that example I had here a tab view. We don't use tab views for iPad or macOS like this. So I'm going to only concentrate on this navigation stack. I had here the sections, and then a couple of like 3 entries for songs and movie and book. And you can see the detail and then navigate more and more and add more and more on top. This is the example for navigation stack. If I now try to do this on the iPad, I can do this either with 2 columns. So then I would basically take this first root view as my side view and have the detail on the right. If I choose to, because I have here multiple sections, I could have also 2 columns on the left, or actually it's a triple column. So now on the left I only show the categories. When I tap on them, then I show in this content column, the second one, the list of all the entries that belong to this category, and then I can show here the detail. So we're going to implement these 2 examples, and I'm going to do this in 2 separate projects which share a lot of information, but this is a little bit cleaner because then you can just concentrate on the one you care about and it's not like a lot of other files in there. If you have a navigation split view and your app runs on compact mode, for example, if I go to split view and only show my app on the most smallest area, it now collapses and the previous sidebar becomes the first root view, and then it basically is the same, it pushes it on the stack. Which means that even if you now only develop for the iPhone, using navigation split view will help you easily adapt for the iPad later. Unfortunately, they're not, navigation stack and navigation split view don't work on the same basis. Because for navigation stack here I had to use a lot of this navigation links and navigation destination modifiers. Whereas for the navigation split view I don't use them. I mean, I hardly use them. The only reason why I wanted to use them is having here this little chevron on the right. Otherwise you don't need to use them. It is for navigation split view we have to look at lists and selections. So I'm going to implement these 2 examples and then I will talk a little bit about customization. For example, you can decide how these 3 columns are distributing their space. So for example, you can prioritize the detail area or have this balanced. You now have modifiers to decide how much width each of these columns take up. So we have a maximum, minimum, and ideal width that we can set for these 2 columns. We also have access to the column visibility. That's, for example, I need to go into this area. This button here I made myself because sometimes you want to allow the user to expand to the full width when they want to. So for this we use this column visibility which we get from the NavigationSplitView controller. Down here I added them as an overlay, so now I'm double column. If I choose now all, you see all 3 columns, or I can say detail only. So with this you can programmatically show different column configurations, which I personally find is very nice. All of these changes are I was missing a lot with the older navigation view. This also works nicely on the Mac. I'm going to have to run this project for iPad, iPhone and Mac quite a lot. So just to make sure how it looks on the different platforms. Let's start by creating a new project for the double column configuration. And I'm going to use a lot of the files from my navigation stack project. You can also find that project on the GitHub, or you just use the final project that I uploaded to get all the other files. I'm trying to use the same things because then you have the same app, the same data on 3 different versions. So it's easier to compare. I'm going for a multi-platform app because we want to also see how it works on macOS. This is a double column navigation split project. Could not have picked a longer name. Now I'm going to drag in some of the files from the stack project. I had here my model definitions, so book, song, and movie. So I'm just going to use the whole group, create groups, copy items if needed. I don't want to have a folder reference. Okay, now I have my models. Then I did create a view model to hold all the data. This is just to handle them easier around. So I'm also importing this. And the other view model that I had was here the navigation state manager. This was simply the taking care of the selection state. So we have to, I'm not going to use this exactly because this for the navigation stack, it's an array because I put more and more views on top. Each of the selection states represents one view. But in our case, from these 3 cases, from these 3 categories with the specific selection, this is not an array anymore. So I have to adapt this. I'm still going to drag it in and then change it from there on. The rest is here the data. So this creates a data blob from my selection path, which I can use to store in user default. This is for state restoration. The same with this object will change sequence, which I actually did not use in the end. And then I had here these 2 functions for programmatic navigation. I still want to use pop to root view. This is interesting for the iPhone configuration or going to the settings. So I'm just going to copy everything and we have to adapt afterwards. The main one that I actually need is here this model file. Then when I create my views, the last one I want to use is because here I had a song detail view and a movie detail view and a settings view. Maybe we're just going to use them too and see what's not working anymore. For example, what happens if I use a navigation link in this case. So I'm going to create in my new project a view group with a subgroup of detail views. The rest I'm not going to use because that's actually the interesting part. So let's go to the content view and I'm going to erase this placeholder data. So we have space for our navigation split view. And this, some of them we are going to use in a minute, like this visibility or the styling. The initializers are ColumnVisibility, sidebar, and detail. This is for the 2 columns. And then here the sidebar and detail only. And then for 3 columns, you have to use the one with sidebar, content, and detail. So let's use the most simple one with the least input, which is sidebar and detail. So in both cases, you have to give a view. And I already said we have to give here 2. So I'm going to, for easier organization, create more subviews. So this is not, otherwise this is going to be building up so much. So my view folder, I'm just creating a view for the sidebar view. So I'm just going to name this here sidebar as a current placeholder. So this becomes my sidebar view. And then for the detail view, we need to decide which of these details actually to show. So let's just add here a text, because I want to actually work on the sidebar. And in order to do this, I need to show my categories and all the entries, and I need the data for this, which I did create in my state object var data manager. This is the file we had here, this model data manager. So this has the actual movie entries and the song entries and the book entries that I want to use in my sidebar. I could just pass this here as an observed object, but because I also wanted to use this in the details for easier navigation, I'm adding this in the environment as my data manager. And now we can work on the sidebar view to show this list. So going in the sidebar view, I need to now access this from the environment object var data manager. This is of type model data manager. And we also need to do this in the preview. Otherwise you won't see anything. So what is in this file? Just a small recap. It's basically 3 entries, 3 arrays of books, songs, and movies, which I get from my example array. So this is just dummy data for testing. I have here a couple of entries like a book with Lord of the Rings. So in my sidebar view, I want to show this in a list. Maybe I use the navigation title sidebar here. Now we can show all of these 3 entries. So again, I'm going to use it for each with my data manager's books and showing here the book's title. I want to have this actually as a section with a section title or section title, which is books. So I am wrapping this around my for each. Now we have this nice section title. So I create 2 more sections for songs where I use it for each that shows the data manager's songs array. And for each of the songs, I'm just going to show a text saying the song's title. And then the last section is movie. And I show it for each with all the movies from my data storage. Each of this movie, I'm showing a text view with the movie.title. So now I have this first column. Let's just, in the preview, I'm now using an iPad. And I go back to my content view. And I'm going to, because it's more interesting in landscape mode, then I see everything. Otherwise, I always need to press here this button. I can adapt to, if you use this toggle, it always uses landscape. And now you see I have my sidebar on the left. This is working with this collapsible style. Now what I want to do is actually be able to select one of these songs or books or movies. And then depending on what I selected, actually show this in the detail. So we basically need to take the information from the sidebar and pass it to the detail. For this, I need to define a state. This is deciding how my navigation is shown, what is the data representation or the state representation of what I want to show. I can say I could say a state would be a selected book or a selected song or selected movie. And actually I also want to have here the settings section, which I forgot in this. So here I also would have a text saying settings. So now you see it comes up down here as an extra entry. Maybe just for now I'm going to change the styling of this list to make it a little bit more clear about our sections. So in here, for after the list, I can say list style. Lists have so many modifiers now. Grouped. Yeah, now you see this more as a group. Going back to what is the selection or what is the state that represents what is selected now, what I show in the detail. So I should have one selection on my sidebar that can be either settings or a movie with a movie selected or a song or a book selected. We have this kind of 4 categories. And when we talk about categories, it's cases. And that is a good use case for an enum. And we have here 4 cases: book, song, movie, and settings. Now let's have a look at the navigation state manager that I imported. And up here, this is the same selection, the same state that I defined before. I have this 4 cases, I have settings, I have book with an associated value, I have song with a specific song and movie. And the good thing about this is I don't need to have a value associated with it, like in settings. The other advantage is I can work with different types because I have either a movie selected or a song selected or a book selected. It's not the same type, which makes it a little bit harder to work with, but the enum helps. And it looks like I can reuse the same definition, but for what is the state property that describes my navigation, it is one of these cases. I only need one of the selection states, not like before where it was a whole path. So I'm changing this to selection state of type selection state. And in the very first time, I don't have anything selected, so this should be nil. And I can say this is nil. Now everything else here doesn't like me. And I'm just going to comment everything out that is now red, because we're going to talk about this later when we talk about state restoration and programmatic navigation. And I don't want to jump ahead right now. So we have this navigation state manager with this one state that defines it all, which means in my content view I can actually use this. Again, it has to be a state object var navigation state manager. I always think my naming conventions are not the best, but I guess you're never happy with this. I don't think I will ever be happy with what I choose. So I have now this one state manager, which I want to use in quite a few views for programmatic navigation. So I'm doing the same. I'm adding this to the environment. This is also because I only have one of these managers. This is nice because now for my detail I can use this. But before we use it, before we actually use the state to set it on our detail, we actually need to manipulate it somewhere, which is done in the sidebar. So in here, I have the list of my possible selection, and because I need to connect this now to my state manager, again I need to use here the environment object var navigation manager. This is a navigation state manager, and I have to also add this here in the preview as an environment object. And I created all these problems in my details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these functions, but I'm going to uncomment what happens in these functions. So basically we can call now go to root view, but nothing happens. Maybe I should have started with an empty one to make it easier. Okay, now in my sidebar, I basically need to now connect what I need to make this list selectable, where I need to tab something. You could, for example, let's try a couple of options here. Add a button with the book's title. And now when I tap on this button, I want to change my selection state. So selection state, this is the book case with this book selected. So now I change the state, which I can now use for the detail. The reason why I do this is I want to test a couple of how should I set up things to get my proper updating. We need to have here some kind of detail to see if it's actually updating. So in my detail view selection, I'm creating a detail view, SwiftUI view. Here I should take the navigation state. So again, the environment object var navigation manager. Just type navigation state manager, adding this in the preview as an environment object. Okay, in here we can now look into the state and decide which detail we actually want to show. So this is the navigation state manager's state. This might be nil, so I need to first check. So if let state is if I have something or if I don't have something. If I haven't something, means I didn't select anything yet. Select something. So this is the placeholder area if I don't have something selected. And if I have a state, this is an enum, so I use a switch state. Use the one with the 3 dots because this is auto completion. Okay, now if I have a movie, I can use my movie detail view with this movie. If I have a song, I can use my song detail view with this song. If I have a book, I can use the book detail with this book. And otherwise I use the settings view. So I now have a view that actually shows me if I changed something. And in the content view, instead of this text, I can use my detail view. Let's try. So I only have here these books. And you see, actually, you see something changing. Right now, I'm only using it for the navigation title. So you should see when I tap here, a lot of the rings, then I am in the book detail with this one, and you see the title. So this is working nicely. Now let's go back to the sidebar. So using a simple button works. This works on the iPad and large. Just going to change to an iPhone. And now I have to take out the landscape mode. Okay, let's see if I can go to the detail. Pressing this doesn't work. And yeah, in order to make this work, I did not implement one major ingredient. This kind of navigation needs to have a list with a selection. And I didn't, when I watched the WWDC talk, where they talked about all this navigation, which is a cookbook to navigation in SwiftUI. They ever mentioned this quite a few times, that you have to have a list with a selection. I just didn't realize I have to have it. I don't know. I didn't think for me, this feels like a very strong limitation that I have to do it in this very specific way. So if we have our navigation split view in 2 columns or 3 columns, this is already for 3 columns. So in one column, you have to have list in the sidebar. You have to have a list and you have to use the selection, because when the list selection changes, the column that comes after is updated. The view is recreated. This updating process, this is the way it updates. So I have to go over the selection. For the 3 column, you have to then have another list in the second column with another selection binding. And this is then, when this changes, the detail is then changed. It's always when the selection changes, the column that comes after is changed, updated. So you have to have a list with a selection to get this proper working on compact mode. As you saw, it works on regular, but on compact it doesn't. Okay, let's try if we can make this work with this selection. And for this, I go into my sidebar. This is also the reason why I directly use the list here, because, yeah. So now if you go for selection, it tells you a selection value. So, and I want to connect this to Navigation State Managers. Okay, this will still not work, because how does it know when you tap what to set for the selection? There is some default behavior. For example, if you have a for each here, it automatically knows that this is kind of the data that you want to select. But in this case, it's actually a song, and it will even take the song's title. So it will try to set a string for this selection state, which will not obviously work, so we won't see any selection. And we need to tell it what the selection type is and what to select when you tap on this text. And the way this is handled is over the tag modifier. So this is my selection state, song type with this song. Can also do this here for settings. And this is then the settings. So now it's only working now it should work for songs and settings. Going to the content view. So if I press here settings, I should see something. Yes, we go. And if I press here songs, I go. If I press here Lord of the Rings, I also go. This is because I go to this. I kind of set this up correctly when I press here this button and change the selection state. So the list selection state changes, which is then propagated up to the navigation stack, which is then pushing it. This looks like a lot of go there, go there, go there. But yeah, it is working. So the main ingredients is you have to have a list with the selection state that you want to update your detail. You can then do this here manually with a button, or you just use the default behavior of a list with this tag. Or if you want to have it more styled, you can use the navigation link with the movie title and then this value based. So this has to be again what I want to select. So this is my selection case with the movie case with this movie selected. So now something should change in my movie area, and you see this chevrons coming up. So if you want the chevrons, you have to use the navigation link, but otherwise you don't. You don't need to. This is the only reason to use a navigation link with navigation split views. If you never like navigation links, then this is good. Let's try this again. If I tap on a movie with this navigation link, chevron styling, I can go to the detail, and all of the other ones also work. So you have here now 3 different ways of doing this, depending on what styling you prefer. And let's go to the iPad in landscape mode. So this is still working, and I mean it was working before with the buttons. If you don't like to use the list, like if you want to use the grid, for example, you can still make it work. You basically just need to have a list with a selection somewhere in the view or in this column. Basically, you could put it in the background or hide it, and then put your main display on the front. I also did this. It works. It's not really a pretty solution, but you have to use lists. That's the thing to use. Now that we have our main setup, I want to actually test programmatic navigation. For example, I uncommented my programmatic navigation things, like here, go to settings. This is not working right now. So I have to go in my song detail view to check where I actually added this button. So this settings button is in the toolbar with the primary action. It just shows this gear icon. And what I execute is this go to settings function. So I'm just going there. So what I need to do when I go to settings, I need to manipulate the navigation state. So this is my selection state. And the case that I want is settings. So trying this now. I go to the song detail view and press on my settings button. And I actually go to the settings. You see also my settings area is highlighted. Trying this on the iPhone. Go to the song detail view, press on the settings button, and you see my view is updating. It is not animating. I would have liked animating, but you can't have everything. Going back to my main view, you see I'm actually if you don't look down here, you should see the animation going. So this is unhighlighting. Maybe I run this in the simulator, because then I can slow down the animation. So going to this view, and then I use slow animations under debug slow animations. Now if I press here settings, you see there was no animation, so I couldn't actually slow something down. It really didn't animate it. If I press now on this, go back to, you see it's actually, the list did recognize our change selection and animates this back. It's going to undo my slow animations. Now, the other thing for programmatic navigation is if I'm here in one of my books and I want to show directly another book. So here in my suggestion area, I have these 3 dummy suggestions. And when I press here, I want to show a different detail view. So to manipulate this, we need to go to the book detail view where I actually have this. So these 3 buttons previously were done with navigation links. I don't do navigation links with, as you already saw, navigation links with navigation split view. What I have to manipulate is my state, which is in my environment object for navigation manager. Navigation state manager, don't forget to put in the preview. Navigation state manager. I will need to manipulate something, so I need a button. With a title, let's say, just doing the same here with this dummy text of suggestion 1. So, and in the action, I want to change my selected state to a bookcase and I want to show a book. Okay, I don't actually have a book, so I need to create something with the suggestion name. So try this out, go back to content view, press here on one of these books, and then the first one, the first one is the one I just created. And you see my suggestion title changes, nothing else because they are all looking the same. Going back, it doesn't animate back because this is not in my list. What we could do, for example, to make it a little bit nicer, VStack with text. People also liked bold, and then I'm going to show the other data. I just need to show some data, which is in my other environment property. Data manager, model data manager, also put this in the preview. So now here I can show a list of other books, or I could also show a list of other songs or something. So this is my data manager's books book, and I need to create a button. So it's basically this button style, and the title is the book's title, and I'm going to set this book as the navigation state. So because these ones are not valid, I'm going to delete them. And we try this together in the content view. Okay, I select a book. Now I select another book like Game of Thrones, and the title changes. And if I go back, it's actually the Game of Thrones that was selected. Okay, you don't see this because I didn't actually add the animation for this ones. Maybe I should have done this for the movies or something. But you see, I'm basically changing always the detail. I don't push on top. I'm just changing the one detail that I have. If you don't want to set the selection state like this here, we can also create another convenience function in the navigation state manager. Like instead of go to settings, we can say set selected book to book, and then I can do the same here. So my selection state changes to book with this book, and I can now use this function in my book detail view. Instead of setting this directly here, I can just say set selected book to this book. Does this read as a normal English sentence? Navigation state manager set selected book to book. You could also say set selected. Yeah, actually it does sound like a proper understandable sentence. Okay, then I still am missing the last function of go back to root view. So this is the root view. Usually if you have a navigation stack and you're very far in the stack, you want to go to the first one. For navigation split view, this only makes sense when you're on the iPhone. On the iPad, you would just basically go back to a placeholder on your detail. You could do this. Okay, so let's decide what to do in order to go back to the root view for compact mode. Everything is decided by our selection state. So I have to manipulate this. And this is a optional selection state, which means that I can have either something selected or nothing. And if it's nothing, it means it's only on the root view. So this is exactly what I wanted. So I set this to no. Now I just need to find out where I actually use this. Pop to root view, looking at the search. I use this in the song detail view. Yeah, down here. So this is the song detail view. Go to root, and you see it goes back. These links don't work because they are still using the navigation link. So let's just also use the button of song.title and setting the navigation state manager selection state to song with this song. And for this, obviously, we can also create another convenient function. So going to state manager, func set selected song to song. So the selection state becomes the case of song with this song selected. These functions might not look like much, but especially if you want to later on, when you're expanding or when you're changing your hierarchy or how you place things, and this is probably very convenient because then you don't have to always look everywhere what you did in which situation. So this means that we are changing here set selected song to song. Try everything again. In my song category, if I tap on one of them, in my song detail, if I tap on one of this, I change which is reflected in the title and also what is here in the detail. And I can go back to root view programmatically. As I said, if you go to an iPad for this song, you can see this even better because if I tap here on a different song, like Smells Like Teen Spirit, it will update it here, but also in the list. So you saw I changed my text and it jumped to a different section. This is very good because it helps the user to understand where he went. Now for the go to root view, you see my list selection becomes empty and I have nothing. So you have to probably decide if you want to show this or not, because it probably doesn't make sense on the iPad in large. This is probably even worse when you're in portrait mode, because you have something selected here and then you press go to root and it just gets blank and you don't know what. So I probably have to hide this on regular size classes. The last thing I want to do is talk about state restoration. That means right now every time I launch with the nothing selected, but I would like to remember what the user selected last and then load that during launch. So you can pick up where he left off, which means we need to save it, and this is usually done with user defaults. And especially if you have multiple scenes, like on the iPad, it's interesting to use the scene storage modifier property wrapper. So this is scene storage. You need to give it a string value. This is for user defaults, the key for user defaults. This is the navigation state var navigation state. And we need to decide what type this is. And basically the one that I need to actually, the state that I need to, the one property I need to save is my selection path. This is an enum with these custom types underneath, which scene storage works with strings, integers, doubles, very easy. And if it's more complex, you have to use a data. But this means I need to now convert my selection state to a data thing. And let's go to the Navigation State Manager. In order to do this conveniently, we had here this computed property. This is the strategy I used. I copied from the WWDC talk for Navigation Cookbook. I'm going to link that and the project they showed so you can see their version. Okay, now I uncomment this. When I want to get my data, I need to take my selection state and create a data from it. And I'm going to do this with a JSON encoder to encode the selection state. This can fail, so this can throw. So I'm using here try question mark. Maybe if I can't do this, I just return null. So this is getting a data from my selection path. And then I need to have the other way around. When I am launching, I have a data thingy that I need to set to my selection state. So that's why this is the setter case. So if this data is actually not nil, I can then decode this to my custom type. And in this case, we have a selection state, not an array. I decode this from my data. And then when I have I should rename this. If I then get a selection state, I can use this to set it on my selection state property. This is really just the convenience of getting a data back and forth. So now my content view, I can use this. Okay, so we have two ways. Let's talk about launching your application. When you launch, we can use onAppear and say, doing launch, I want to reset doing launch. I want to reset my state during launch, which means that I have to take the saved state and set it on my navigation state manager. So navigation state manager selected state should now get my navigation state, or maybe I just name this to data. because this is a data, I can't directly set it here to my state. That's why I had here this data property. So when I launch, I take my data blob from last time. I set it on my data property, which then goes into the setter. I decode to get my selection state type. When I have this, I set it on my selection state property. This is then used in order to configure my sidebar and my detail view. Okay, this is the getting it back during launch part, but we need to also save it. And when do I want to save it? Every time my state changes, I need to save. And which property is changing? My navigation state manager selection path, selection state has changing, then I want to save. So we have view modifiers like on change. This is when a property changes, but in this case, I'm using something for my view model. And then I'm going to use a little bit of combine. So instead of on change, I use on receive. And the publisher that is changing that I want to take care of is my selection state. So this dollar in front of the selection state means it's a publisher. So now here I get my new state. And I have my new state. I actually want to have the data blob, so I can set it here on my scene storage property. So my navigation state data needs to get a data thingy, and I can also use this data property here. This is my navigation state manager data property. So I actually don't use this directly, and I can just ignore the property itself. So when I want to get a data, to the definition, it uses the getter, which means it's encoding the selection state. And this is executed every time my selection changes. So when I tap on a different group, a different book, then this is executed. What this does is you save this state to user default. The thing to know with this on receive here, it's executed every time a selection changes. And this is also true the first time. But the first time I actually don't want to save this because it's nil. So the first value I want to ignore, and I'm just going to ignore this by say drop first. I don't want to ignore the nil values because like on the iPhone, maybe I want to have a distinction. I want to go back to the root view if this is the last view I was in. Okay, in order to test this now, we have to run it in the simulator. Okay, I didn't run this, so I just need to select something. So we pick Game of Thrones. Then I need to leave. This is just so it actually saves it. It really saves it to user default because this is not saved all the time. And if I run and launch again, you see we are picking up at Game of Thrones again. Then we can try this also on the iPhone. I select Lord of Rings. Then I leave and stop and build again. And I pick up directly at Lord of the Rings. Now I go to the main view, to the root view, or the sidebar. I leave now because I want to make sure I actually also save this. And we pick up back at the sidebar. So this is important to test all of the state possibilities that come back on launch. So this is the main part for 2 columns, but I didn't run this on my Mac. So you have to have macOS Ventura. And yes, I have an error for list style grouped. What do you have on? Okay, I still want to. Okay, let's use a conditional for the platform. If OS is iOS, I'm using grouped. #else, #end, if. Okay, so the else would be the macOS version, and there I want to use a list style of bordered, insert. Yeah, the alternate background doesn't really make sense. Sidebar should be actually the default. Okay, as a comparison between Mac and iPad. So I do see here my sections. This is also with this collapsible sections. Because I used for the first book section buttons, they look quite different. You could change this by saying, making them a button style of plain. Yeah, or maybe in this case it really makes sense to go tag for the list, or for here this navigation links, just so you get the correct styling. Because we have to use lists, you're more limited with the styling, but it basically works. We can also try here going to programmatic to go to settings, and we indeed go to settings. Or I can change here to a different one, like Rolling Stone, and the title here changes, and also my view changes, and the list selection changes. So everything works fine. In this case, really go to the root view doesn't make sense, because then I just clear everything, which you might want to do if you delete a document or something. You want to also delete the selection, clear the selection. On macOS also you get this hide sidebar button. This is the same button as here. Let's now work on a navigation split view with 3 columns. Previously I had just one column where I had all my data, but now I can distribute this over 2 columns. And in this example, we're just using our categories like movie in the first sidebar, then in the content or the middle column, we're going to show then the movies when I select this. If I'm in songs, I show the songs, or books if I'm in the book section. Then when I tap on one of the elements in my content in the middle column, I'm going to update my detail. We now have to separate our code in these 3 main columns. I'm doing everything in a new project to keep everything nicely organized, but I'm obviously going to reuse quite a bit, especially for the data and the detail views. Let's start by a new project, obviously multi-platform. Then this is a triple column navigation split project. The files that I again want to reuse are my models, so for movie, song and book. So I'm just going to drag this whole group in my new project, create groups, copy items if needed. And then from the view models, I definitely need to have my data model because that was the convenience. My navigation state manager, I'm actually going to create a different one because I want to, the definition of my state I'm going to do differently. So I'm only going to use the model file, again, new group, view model, and I'm only using the model data manager. Then I do like to keep here my detail views. The only thing is they're going to complain because I don't have a navigation state manager. So I need to at least create an empty one. So this is Swift file. Class conforms to observable object. And now I create a group for my views and another group for my detail views. So we can decide which ones to use. So I'm just going to copy all the book, detail, movie and settings and song. I did have here this set selected book action. So I probably at least should add these functions. I can add them empty. So this is these 3 functions that I also use, but they're not going to have anything inside them yet because I'm going to change my selection state structure. And I think it's just a problem of not having anything in here. So this is I just need to have one property, and actually I'm going to change to a category. Selected category, because I want to represent my first column as only the category selected. I need to actually have something, so I'm creating an enum. Category, case book, case song, case movie, and case settings. So this is a category optional because maybe I probably didn't select anything in the beginning. Okay, I'm going to just uncomment this and find out later what I did wrong. Okay. This is everything I want to so far reuse. When I start in the content view, I again need to create two state objects for my model data. For my data manager, just to get all my dummy data, which I put in the environment. And I also do the same for my navigation state manager. And also put this in the environment. So now I can delete this default view, and we can start fresh from the navigation split view. And in this case, I want to use the sidebar content detail, so with the 3 elements. For each of these views, I'm creating a subview. So starting with a sidebar view, then actually it's called content, but I don't really want to call this content. So this is a second column. I'm going to call this middle sidebar view. Or I could also call it sidebar detail view. And then the next one is the detail view. So my content now has a sidebar view, a middle sidebar view, and a detail view. Let's talk about the sidebar view. So in here I want to show my categories, because this is, and I need to select them, and we are working with a split view, so everything needs to be a list with a selection. The selection is attached to my navigation state manager. So I'm going to, this binding goes to the navigation state manager to the selected category. I'm going to just add here navigation title of categories. So in here I can show my 4 categories. To make this easier, you can change the enum. Actually, we only made this enum very basic. So for example, we can add a raw value of type string. We should make this hashable because it works with the list selection. And I can add a function title switch self. So I can show book. I can return string values for all the cases, so song, book, movie, and setting. And because I want to have the easier way of getting all the cases, so I can work with the for each. This is returning a string. And because I want to easier work with for each to get all cases, I'm going to make this case iteratable. So now in my sidebar view, I can use for each of my categories dot, and now you see all cases. For category, I can show a text with the category's title. And just to make sure I get the right one, I say the tag is category. And I forgot to make category identifiable. So identifiable, which means I need to have an ID, var ID. I use the string raw value. Return self.raw value. This is because I never have multiple of them anywhere. I only use it in a list, and I know I only have them each by each. I do have the main part. I have my list with the selection of my selected category. Going back to the content view just to see. And I do this on an iPad. In landscape. And you see on the left, we have this selection. And I can actually tap on something and it highlights the selection. Okay, now that I have the selected category, I can actually use it in my middle sidebar to show. So we go in the middle sidebar view. Again, I need to have my environment, objects, Actually, I need both my data manager because I need to actually show my data. I mean, I need to have access to the data I'm supposed to show. And the environment object for navigation manager. And adding them again down here. This is going to be more fun because I am going to use a lot of if statements. So what I have to check is the navigation state for the selected category. So in my navigation state manager, the selected category, because this is optional, I need to take care of this. So if let category equal category. Else, if I don't have anything, I need to put a placeholder. So this is select a category. And now, if I have a category, I need to check which case it is to then grab from the data manager the corresponding data. So switch category. Use the one with the 3 dots. So if I am in the case of books, I now have to use my book data. So I have to show a list of my data managers, the books. Book, and then I can show here the book's title. If I'm in the case of songs, I show a list of my data manager songs. So I show the song's title in a text. If I have a movie, then I show a list of my data managers' movies. This is then the movie's title, and in case of settings, I'm just going to show a text. So ideally, I actually want, in case of settings, I want to only show 2 columns, but this doesn't work. You can't just switch and do whatever. You have to decide either everything is a 2 column or everything is a 3 column. Okay, going to the content view, and I have here now the selected category. This is the placeholder for the middle column. Nothing is selected. I select the book, and my middle column updates. We could also add here the title. So this is in my sidebar, in my middle column. You can add here navigation title of books, songs, and settings. So now you see it's nicely connected. What I can't do, or what I just put in a very plain implementation, trying to select something doesn't work. This is the same again. We need to use a list with a selection. So going back to the middle sidebar view. For example, I'm in the case of list and I need to here select a book or connect a selected binding for books. I would also need to have one for selected song, selected movie. So we need to have state properties where we can connect this binding to, which I do in the state manager. So here, after my selected category, I will create 3 more for selected song. This is song optional nil. Add published var selected movie. This is of type movie, optional nil. And add published var selected book of type book, optional, and starting with nil. You might already see a problem with defining the state like this. I can get some undefined states. For example, if I'm the category of movie, I have a movie selected and then I switch to song, I will still have a selected movie, even if in a different category. In order to do this properly, we need to check how these properties behave and maybe manually update them correctly so they always make sense. For example, if I am in the category of songs, I should not have a selected movie or a selected book. I could keep the old ones. This is just preference. Okay, now in my middle sidebar view, I have selection properties. So now I can use here selection and use the binding to my navigation state manager selected book. For songs, for the song list, I can do the same for binding navigation state manager selected song and selection for binding to movies, selected movie. I probably still need to use the tags because otherwise it uses the title again. So tag book, let's see. Go back to content view. Okay, the book selection I can select. Songs I cannot, so I really need to use the tag. So I need to use a tag for song and a tag for movie. Now we set up the first column and the middle column for the correct selection, and we can now connect to the detail view. The detail view will need all of this information. Actually, the detail view only cares if one of this selection. So let's go to the detail view, and I again need to have the state manager. So it's basically this. So I have to have the environment objects again for the navigation state manager. In order to not get too many undefined states, I again have to check for the navigation state. For the category like I did here, basically I need to do the same of checking if I have a category, if I have a category, which detail I want to show. Just going to copy this and so the default, the placeholder, one of them is select something. If I don't even have a category selected. So now I'm just going to delete all the lists. So if I have a category selected, and if I have a book selected, in the book case, if let book, navigation state manager selected book, then I can show the book detail view with this book. Else, I can show placeholder, for example, because I'm in the book category, select a book. Same for song. I first have to check if I have a selected song. Navigation state manager selected song. If I do, I can show the song detail view for this song. And else, I have to give a placeholder like select a song. You could always obviously make this a lot nicer, this placeholder views. Then for movie, same game, if let movie is navigation state manager selected movie. This is then movie detail with this movie. Else, the placeholder, let's say select a movie. And then in case of settings, I'm just showing the settings view. Okay, now I can use this detail together with my content. So I start by not having anything selected, and I select a book. I see my middle column, I select a book, and we get the detail view correctly. Can also switch or go to songs. And now when I'm in songs and I go back to books, it picks up on the last selected book because I didn't clean that. I just left it inside. Whereas I never selected a movie, and in the movie case, it says select a movie. This might actually be advantageous behavior because then you don't always have here this empty screen. Maybe the user wants to shortly check another song and then wants to go back to the same book. So it might be actually a good idea to keep the book. And we don't actually want to change the other values. Or you can say, if you don't like this, and you want to actually say, yeah, I don't want to go back to the last selected book, I want to erase this. We can in the navigation state manager. Okay, maybe I should get this category out here. So I'm just going to place this in a separate file. This is a Swift file. It just confuses me that it's always on the top. So, and it's technically not a view model, but it's, maybe I should organize some, that's why I sometimes don't like it, but it doesn't really belong to models. Okay, anyways, let's say you want to change the other movie or books whenever you change the category. We can use combine for this, or you can use the did sets here. Just going to use combine for this. So I need to have a subscription property. This is a set of any cancellables. And in the initializer, I'm going to set up my updating. So what I want to do is when I change my selected category, I want to clear all of my selection states. So I can say I hook up I'm using the publisher for select category to get always called when this changes. So this is category. I'm not going to actually use it. I just need to use weak self. I don't really care. I'm going to just set all of them empty. Selected song is nil. Self.selected movie is nil. And self.selected book is nil. Now I need to store this in my subscriptions. So let's see the different behavior. So I select a book, then I go to the song category. I select a song here, and I go back to books. Previously, we saw the last selected book, but in this case, it's empty. Same if I go to songs, I start again with the empty song. So this would be two versions of how you want to work on the iPad. I think the other without clearing, it's maybe a little bit better. Now let's go for the iPhone. And now I have to get away from my landscape mode. Okay, so I select a category. Okay, in this case, I probably really want to have my chevrons. So this is again, if you want to have the chevrons, don't use text and tag. You can use a navigation link of, so the title is the category's title, and the raw value is the category, and the value. Now I have my nice chevrons. You can also do this in the detail views. And I go in here. In this case, I actually don't need to clear anything unless I do programmatic navigation, because if I'm here in a song detail, if I want to now select a movie, I need to actually go back to the first screen. And then when I do this, I already unselect my selected song. So it's kind of fine, I guess. So I don't need to do this kind of updating per default. So for now, I'm just going to not use this because I prefer the other version. Clear selection, and then category changes. You can choose if you want to do this or not. It's not going to have an influence on the iPhone. Because, yeah, we always reset things here. If I like this behavior on iPad, I probably also am fine with on the Mac, because, yeah, they are also in 3 columns. Maybe I should try this now. So per default, apparently the sidebar is not there. We also need to talk about how to get this per default on launch. But you see here, going back to the last selection, the movie detail view actually doesn't show much. Maybe I'm just going to add something because the navigation title is not really seen. So I'm just going to show the movie's title in font.title. Otherwise it looks like nothing changed. So if I go for movies, and now you see the title. If I go for songs, select something. If I go back to movies, it's still the same movie selected. So in this case, it's probably even better with having this, keeping the selected books and songs and movies separately, not like when I had them with the enum together. But obviously you can change this if you want to. I am not happy about is the settings, because this is in this 3 columns. On macOS I wouldn't do this anyway, because on macOS the settings are here in the main project folder. You can have here a settings view. That makes much more sense. We can do this by adding here settings. Content is my settings view. This automatically adds it to the menu. Here now appears the settings. Okay, I should have made this a little bit. I need to add some view modifiers to make it expandable. But we have new things of, it's the default size, which you can say, I don't know, 300 by 300. I don't know, this changes all the time. It's very annoying. So, no. Maybe it doesn't work with this one. Okay, I'm just going to add a frame around my settings. Frame, max with infinity, max with infinity. Okay, maybe I should add a minimum height. Minimum width of 300 and a minimum height of 300. So my settings view is a little bit better. So going here, settings, now gives me this nicer settings view, which means that on macOS definitely doesn't make sense to keep it here. I'm going to remove it from my categories. So here I'm going to remove settings. It's going to complain quite a lot. Wherever I had this. In my detail view I don't have the settings. And in my middle sidebar I don't have the settings. Okay, this works. Okay, this is now placing the settings where they belong on macOS. On iPad and iOS, you could in the sidebar view here add a settings button. So this is in the toolbar. This is a button. Oh no, this is, I want to use an icon, so I need to use the one with the label. Image with system name of gear. And how do I show the settings view now if it's not in the navigation stack? Maybe I use a sheet, and with this presented I only need to use one. So this is an add state private var show settings. And in the beginning I don't show this. So now I can use this in my sheet, and the content is the settings view. When I press now my gear button, I'm going to toggle this show settings property. This only makes sense on iOS. I'm adding here a hashtag if OS is iOS hashtag and if. So this is only using it on iOS. I don't need to take care of this settings view because on macOS this is only working on macOS. On iOS it doesn't do anything. So let's run this on the iPhone. Okay, I need to make, it doesn't work on iOS, so if OS is OSX hashtag and F. So it doesn't exist on iOS, but which means you need to use a conditional here too. Okay, now the only difference is I have my gear icon up here, and it shows this in a sheet. You can also show a full screen or a popover, although on iOS this would be still a sheet. Having the settings adjusted correctly, placed correctly for iOS and macOS makes it also easier for my navigation. Don't need to work with these weird 3 columns with settings, unless I have a reason to. You can still use it on iOS if you want to. We have multiple sub-settings categories. The last thing for our state I want to do is the state restoration. So what do I have to restore now? So in the navigation, all of my navigation states are in the navigation state manager. So these are the 4 properties that I have to deal with. And the one that I definitely want to have stored is my selected category. So let's save this first. In the content view, I'm going to save this in scene delegates. And this is also easier. This is nice, especially on macOS, because then every scene, every window gets its own stored. So this is a scene storage. This is the selected category or selected category. And from the data that I want to use here, from the limitations of user defaults, it's integer, string, double, or data. Because I already have an easy enum, I'm using a string. That is optional. And that's why I'm going to probably, just not to confuse myself, because this is not a select category, it's the select category string or raw value. Now I have these two properties that I need to connect, one in the navigation state manager and this scene storage property. So I need to connect them back and forward. So on appear, when the app launches, I mean, you can also use task. I showed this in the other example, and it's also in the WWDC example project for navigation cookbook. You can also look there. I will link this in the description. So on appear, restore state during launch. When I restore this, I need to take it from where I saved this, which is my selected category string value. And I need to set this to my selected category in the state manager. So I can create a category from raw value from the selected string. This is a string, so I probably only should do that if I have a value. If let category string is selected category string. If I have something, okay, maybe I use a guard statement. Guard. If I don't have anything, I might as well just stop, else return. Okay, if I have something, I can now create a category from raw value, and I can set this to my navigation state manager's selected category. Okay, this is half when I launch, and now I also need to do the opposite direction of when I change my category. I actually need to save it to this user defaults to the scene storage. So I'm using on receive to hook up to changes to my selected category. So this is in my navigation state manager's the selected category. This is the publisher. So this is the new category. When I get a new category, I want to set it to my selected string. And the new I'm going to set the new category's raw value. If I keep it like this, I will also execute this for the first time. And the first value here is nil. I don't really want to store the first value and then set it to the nil value. So I'm going to drop the first. Okay, when I run this, we know should be able to restore for the select category. Just going to do this for the iPad. So nothing is selected. I select the book. Now I leave and I run again. And we are in the selected book category. This is good. So the first part is working. Now the second thing is, if I had a book selected, I want to actually restore that. But I don't want to save the whole book because maybe the book changes. But now I just have dummy data. So I rather just store the ID or the unique identifier. Because I have UUIDs, I can get a UUID string. So I can save the selected book. And actually it's not just the book, it's the ID. This is again a string optional. So when I am changing my navigation state manager's the selected books, I'm again dropping the first. This is the new book. When I have a new book, I want to say my selected books ID that I save becomes now my new books ID's UID string. Because this new book is optional, maybe this is nil, but I'm guessing it's fine to, this is like on the iPhone. I would just set it to nil again. Okay, so this is the part of saving the new state to user defaults. And then during launch on appear, I also need to reset this. Here I already did this for the selected category, and I returned early when I don't have a selected category, but I guess it makes sense that if I don't have a selected category, I can't have a selected book. So after I set the category, I'm going to restore my book. So first I need to actually check if I have an ID. So this is my selected book ID, else return. And I actually can create a UUID from UID string. This is also optional, so let's just add this to the guard statement. And now I actually need to find the book with this ID. So if let selected book is, and now I have to go for my data storage. Do I have a book? First, where the book's ID is equal to this ID. This means I have something, and then I can say the navigation manager's selected book becomes this book. Equal. Okay, now I need to save one of the books to Game of Thrones. I leave and I start again. And this is not working, so I'm just setting here a breakpoint to see if it's actually updating. If I select a new book, so it does set it there. Press on play to continue. Okay, let's see what happens during launch. I'm just going to put another breakpoint on appear. So I get a new selected category string. I can set this to my selected category. I am trying to access my selected book ID. I get this. I try to find this ID and I cannot find the ID. Okay, this is because of my data storage. If you now can guess what I did wrong, congratulations, because this is a, well, it's only a unique error. It's a unique bug. This is because every time I launch my application, I actually change my IDs. Because every time I do that, I access here my books, and then I get this. Here, basically, I create a new one every time. In order to make this reproducible for every launch, I should not create here the UID every time. I'm just going to create here a default one. Self.id is this ID, but for my examples, the one I'm using, I need to create a UUID and fix this, otherwise they are always different. Okay. So I just copied the string value from the debugger, and I'm doing the same for the other two. I mean, usually this you wouldn't have this problem normally. I just need to change them a little bit by 8 and 9. So now every time I launch, I have the same IDs. So when I search through these IDs, I should find it back. Let's select a book, Lord of the Rings. I leave. And I start again. And we go back to the Lord of the Rings. I guess my data is a little bit too simple. Now, you see I can restore all of my data. You could do the same for the selected song and movie. Or you could say I only want to save one of them, the one from the selected category. For example, here, I just need to have a published var because otherwise I cannot easily connect it to the view. Selected ID. This is string optional. No. If you don't want to use combine, you can also use a did set. If I set my selected song, the selected ID becomes my selected song's ID, UUID, and the same for the other two. So now every time I change the selected song or the selected movie or the selected book, I'm saving this in the selected ID. In the content view, you could then hook up with onReceive to the selected ID and save that one to the selected ID. And then in the onAppear, you can use that ID to search through all of your books or songs or movies. If you find one, you set this on the selected property. So you have a lot of options of what you want to update how. It's a little bit more work because we have more data that we might want to store, and you have you basically have a lot more option of what you actually want to save. And if you want to save the whole thing or just the ID, for example. Last, I want to have a look at all the styling possibilities for navigation split views. There's quite a few more things to investigate. And we start by looking at the column visibility, because this allows us to actually know which of these views are, if you show 3 columns or 2 columns or the detail only. This property we can access from the navigation split view. So this is the first one, which is column visibility. This is for both 2 column or 3 column. And you get the binding to navigation split view visibility. Because I want to use this in a different context too, somewhere in one of the detail views. I'm going to create a state property in my navigation state manager. Maybe just on the top. So this is add published var column visibility of type column visibility. This has to have a value, let's say all. It does not find it because it's only in SwiftUI, so I need to import SwiftUI. Now I can use this here in my navigation state manager, the column visibility. Try this again. When I launch now, I already have a difference because I start off directly with showing all. Before, it was only showing 2 of these columns. This might be an interesting case for you. Especially, I do like this especially in portrait mode, because sometimes you just have nothing selected and then it shows the detail with nothing. But now by setting it directly to all, when you launch it in portrait, you see directly this sidebar columns. So that's the first use case of this column visibility, changing the styling on launch. And the next one, this is more my personal preference. I want to have here this expandable button. I want to have a button that hides the sidebar to make it bigger. Because there's sometimes you just want to concentrate on the detail. And the trick is now I only want to show this button when I am in this configuration on landscape with 2 columns. Where do I want to do this? Let's say I want to do this in the book detail view. So because that's the reason why I put it in the column visibility in the navigation state manager. So the button is supposed to go in the toolbar. So this is toolbar and toolbar item with placement, navigation, or should I use primary action? I never know which one to use. Always have to try them out. So now I want to have a button with action label. I want to have the label for the icon. So this is image with system name. And the one I wanted is arrow up. Oh my god. It's actually up left. And so we have either this one or this one. And I guess I want to expand it. So it's supposed to be this one. And how do I do this? I have now this navigation state manager's column visibility. And I can set this to detail only. Try. I have it on the other side. So the placement is wrong. So probably navigation bar leading. Or just navigation. Navigation. Okay, this seems to be alright. Now if I tap on this, you see it goes up. Unfortunately, I don't really want to show it now. So I want to hide it when I'm already in the detail only. I don't want to show this. So you can add a if statement not around the toolbar item, around the button. So if my navigation state manager's column visibility is not detail only, then I want to show this. Okay, now I have this button. If I go in the detail only, it hides, and I have this one for showing that it actually, for the sidebar ones. This is good. In portrait, it doesn't show because I'm in a different state. I think it just ignores it. Okay, it shows really shortly, but I can live with this thing. Let's go for the iPhone. And you see it's not showing here because it's always in all state, because my initial value is all, and on the iPhone it basically ignores this property, so it never changes it away from all, so it's always this one. And this means it's there, which I don't want. So now we could change this value to be differently on the iPhone, but it's the same with in split screen. So what I want to hide it to is in horizontal, in compact mode. I don't want to show this in compact mode. So this is, and knowing which size class, I need to access the environment object for \dot horizontal size class, var horizontal size class. So if my horizontal size class is regular, then I can show this. So try this for the iPhone. Maybe I should just run this on the iPad. I go to the detail, and it's not actually there. I just have the gear icon, or maybe I should have placed the gear icon in some other place. And we test this also on the iPad. So now I have it in the right settings. And the split screen is actually the one that is the most use case. So you see it's not appearing for the small ones, for the compact size class. For this one, we're not going to go into detail, only detail. Okay, it doesn't update it here correctly. Now I think it's because of this gear icon. Sometimes they're just like weird. Okay, I need to change my gear icon, which is in the sidebar view. And I guess I should not have just put it in like so. So I use the placement of primary action. Don't know why it's appearing everywhere, because I only added in the toolbar of the sidebar. Okay, now I have this. Go for split screen. But this is the sidebar. Navigation. Okay, maybe I should just, maybe I'm just going to. Okay, now it doesn't appear. It is on the other side where I actually didn't want it. Okay, it comes back. I'm not really sure if this is me. I don't understand. Sometimes the toolbar thingies go everywhere. Okay, I guess this is the closest I get to my working solution of hiding this button, of only showing this button when I actually need it, which is in this configuration. Now last, we need to check if I broke something with macOS. Yes, I did. It doesn't have horizontal size classes, so we use a trick to hide this because the whole property is not there. So this is #if macOS is iOS. Only then I can use this property. Else, and if, then the property I want to actually use is the whole thing here. And I just want to replace this property. So this is actually regular. I'm making this a computed property. If my horizontal size class is regular, then I return true. So this is, okay, maybe I should call this is regular. So I only show this if we are in the regular. Okay, it's complaining because I don't have this property on macOS here. This is the macOS. So is regular, and just create the same property with the same name. True. So this is one trick of working with iOS and macOS. If you have an environment property that is only on iOS. And I need to go to a book detail. Now I have here this button, and it doesn't do anything. It sets this property, but the column visibility is just ignored. So in order to not show this, I'm just saying this is here not regular. This is false. So then it's always ignored. I mean, it is irregular, but I just want to hide it. So now we don't have this button that doesn't do anything. I would like to hide this stupid middle column, but this is not, I haven't figured out how to do this yet. You can only collapse the sidebar, but you always see the second column. Although I think this should be actually included, just don't know what I do. But this brings us to the next customization of the split view styles, of how to customize my columns. So here the navigation split view has view modifiers. It's too many. So we have navigation split view style. The automatic, we have balanced, prominent, and the automatic you already saw. So balanced. Not even sure if this does anything on macOS. Per default, they're anyways expandable. I don't think anything happened. So let's try this on the iPad. And what you see here, well, there's a subtle difference. The right column is not grayed out. This is because it's not overlaid by the other two. Balanced means that the right detail just gets the rest of the space. And because of this button, actually can go there, but it never takes, I mean, it's never overlaid. It just is shrink down to this available rest of the space. Maybe I just undo this to demonstrate the difference. So you see here it's grayed out, and it's like cut, some parts are cut over, and then it slides back in. In the other example, it was just really this available space. Okay, this is balanced, and then we have navigation state, navigation split view style of prominent detail. This is for people who like to have their details taking up most of the space. So you see my detail is always really big. Okay, in this case I don't need my expandable button because it's always expanded. So you never have the second column there. The name says prominent detail. Let's just see if that does anything on Mac. These don't make sense on compact, so I'm not going to run this on the iPhone. Does it look different? I don't think so. Okay, again, this doesn't make any difference. Yeah, I mean, even if I look at the documentation or the source, it doesn't say anything about what exactly the behavior is on these different platforms. So I guess you just have to try what you like. Now we had, okay, you have a little bit more control of how these details are shown. This is one way of distributing the space. And then we have this navigation split view column width, which means that I need to adjust this. I can adjust these columns. And the columns in my case is either the sidebar or the middle one. So I can attach it here. This is navigation split view column width. You either can say what width, fixed width, or minimum and ideal and maximum. Let's say I go for 100. This is extreme on purpose on the iPad. I guess this is also ignored on the iPhone in compact mode because there it just takes all the space. You see, clearly my first column is now very small. So this is probably too small. Maybe something like 200 makes sense for both of them. I guess also in my case it makes sense because I don't have so large data, especially for the very left column. Okay, I probably should change the navigation title style in my sidebar. So I have here this, and I change it to navigation title display mode, or whatever this was. Navigation title display mode inline. So now it actually fits. Maybe I also should do that for the second one. But like this, I take more advantage of the space. Then so this is the navigation split view column width with a fixed value, or width minimum, ideal, and maximum. I guess 200 is the minimum, 250, and maximum is 300. I don't think you can change this on the iPad. Yeah, I mean, I don't really, not sure how it adjusts this. I'm guessing it uses the ideal one. So if I make this really large and this really small, we can see. Yeah, I guess it's using 250. 500 would look much different and 100 would look much smaller. So I guess on the iPad it just uses the ideal one. On iPhone or in compact mode it just ignores the whole thing because it just uses the screen. And on macOS, okay, no display mode, so hashtag if OS is iOS, hashtag end if. So it's only using this navigation bar title in display mode on the iOS. I just select something. And now I try to expand. So on the, maybe I just go back to the view where we had this. So the sidebar, I put a fixed value of 200. That's why if I try to expand, it doesn't work. I can still collapse it. If for the middle or the content area, content column, I set minimum, ideal, and maximum. And I can actually expand this until a certain level. I guess this is 500. I don't think we go back down to 100. Maybe it's also limited to the content size. No, maybe it uses the ideal. Okay, I don't really know what it's doing in this case. But you see, this navigation split view column width is nice for adjusting these columns. Like on the iPad, you can't manually do this. I mean, the user can't do this. But if you have very small data, it's worth it. This is the end of the tutorial with these two examples for a 2-column and a 3-column navigation split view. If you want to make this work, you have to take care of you have to use a navigation split view. And for the sidebar column and the content column, you have to put in lists with a selection binding in order to get the correct updating of the next column. If you don't do this, you will not get the correct behavior on the iPad, compact mode, or on the iPhone, because then it just doesn't push on top. If you use this, you can have the same navigation stack as for the navigation stack view. With navigation split view, you don't need to use navigation links with values. Because of this list binding, all the updating is working over this. Only in case you want to have this nicer styling with the chevron, you can use it. This means setting up a navigation stack correctly and a navigation split view is quite different because they use different mechanisms. Just be aware of this, that once you have a navigation stack implementation and you want to switch, it's a little bit more work. The nice thing about the navigation split view that is available for iPad and macOS and also the iPhone is that we have now more customization. For example, we get the column visibility to show and hide these columns or show all of these columns. We can now customize the space distribution of having a balanced distribution or prioritizing the detail area. We can customize the column, how wide these columns are, how much they can be expanded. This is interesting for macOS. So I guess they are trying to push a little bit more into the direction of macOS for people to go more into making apps for Mac. And I think this is quite a good step. I didn't find any major problems, maybe just the small problems with missing animations. The one that I'm annoyed mostly about is the toolbar, because sometimes things move, as you saw. Sometimes buttons are there where I don't think they should be. I don't really know why. Maybe it already is resolved when you watch this. They updated the toolbar also. I'm going to make a small video about the toolbar because we have some more modifiers. And also like customizing the toolbar, for letting the user customize the toolbar later. So this is nice. Stay tuned for that part. If you have problems with understanding state-driven navigation, on how navigation works in general, you can also watch my introduction to state-driven navigation, because I show more examples. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video. Leave a comment if you're happy with the new navigation APIs or if you struggle sometimes too. Until next time, happy coding.